We treat desire as a sanctuary. We speak of beauty as if it were a promise of peace. But the ancient world knew that before she was a goddess, she was a tidal wave, and that love is not a comfort, but the first catastrophe. Myths and legends. Aphrodite. She did not begin on Olympus, nor was she born from the lineage of the King of Heaven. Her origins belong to the violent dawn of reality, long before the rise of the younger gods, when the Titan Cronus took up a flint sickle and severed the genitals of his father Uranus. The discarded flesh was flung into the churning sea. As the white foam mixed with the immortal blood, a mutation occurred in the deep water. From that boiling crimson froth, she emerged off the coast of Cyprus. She did not step onto the shore as a helpless infant. Aphrodite walked onto the sand fully formed, a force of primordial nature so blindingly beautiful that grass grew beneath her feet wherever she stepped. The seasons rushed to clothe her in gold, and the oceans calmed in her presence. She was the embodiment of the raw, procreative urge of the universe, born from mutilation and carrying an inheritance of absolute, unyielding power. When this primordial force was brought to the heights of Olympus, the mountain fractured with rivalry. Every god desired her, realizing that whoever stood closest to her stood closest to the blood pulse of the world. To neutralize the threat of civil war, the King of Heaven forced her into a marriage of cold convenience, assigning her to Hephaestus, the broken, exiled god of the forge. It was an alignment of absolute opposites, the apex of beauty bound to the lord of ash and iron. Aphrodite did not submit to the contract. She turned her gaze back toward the battlefield, initiating a secret, torrid affair with Ares, the god of war. But the artisan god was not blind. He forged a trap out of copper and wire, a net so fine it was invisible to the eye, yet stronger than adamant. When the lovers met in the dark, the trap snapped shut. They were pinned to the bed, entangled in an unbreakable metallic web. Hephaestus threw open the doors, inviting the assembly of the gods to look upon their public humiliation. But as the immortals stared, they did not see a crime defeated. They saw the terrifying truth that even the most brutal violence of war and the hardest iron of the forge are entirely helpless against the pull of desire. Her vengeance, however, was swift and total, when her divinity was insulted by mortals who tried to resist her law. The prince Hippolytus learned this code when he swore a vow of absolute chastity, dedicating his life to the wild hunt of Artemis and mocking the altars of desire. Aphrodite did not strike him with an arrow. She quietly poisoned the air around his family. She draped a heavy, maddening shroud of lust over his stepmother, Phaedra, forcing her to fall into an unnatural, agonized desire for the young prince. The architectural precision of her trap was absolute, driving Phaedra to take her own life, while leaving behind a letter that falsely accused the youth. Accused by Phaedra's final lie, Hippolytus fled the palace in his chariot along the rocky coastline. Theseus called upon Poseidon to punish his son, and from the white surf the sea god sent a monstrous bull. The horses panicked, the chariot shattered against the cliffs, and the prince was dragged through the sharp rocks until his body was unmade. Aphrodite had proved that to deny desire is not an act of virtue. It is an act of hubris, that will rip a kingdom apart. This same unyielding power allowed her to tilt the balance of empires with a single word. When the shepherd prince Paris was forced to judge who among the goddesses was the most beautiful, Aphrodite did not offer him kingdoms or military glory. She offered him a living spark hidden inside a mortal queen, Helen of Sparta. She did not care that Helen was already bound by sacred oaths to a king of men. Aphrodite shattered the contracts of hospitality and the laws of nations, untying Helen's heart and pulling her across the Aegean Sea to the towers of Troy. For 10 years, the greatest armies of the ancient world slaughtered one another in the dust for a glance from that single woman. Aphrodite watched the walls burn and the heroes fall, unmoved by the scale of the carnage. To her, the Trojan War was not a geopolitical conflict. It was simply the natural, destructive footprint of her presence. She had turned the bronze of the earth into ash, proving that a single spark of desire is heavier than the armies of the world. Now, the myth drops its golden veil. Aphrodite is the personification of the primitive drive. She represents the uncomfortable truth that desire is not a choice we make, but a biological and cosmic tide that moves through us. She is the realization that love carries a baseline of violence. It shatters boundaries, breaks laws, and demands the surrender of our logic. We need her myth because it strips away our illusions of control. She is the reminder that beauty is a weapon, and desire is a sovereign force that does not negotiate with our morality. She is the ancient foam-born certainty that the things that give us life are the very same things that possess the power to utterly destroy us. The goddess of desire steps along the shore of Cyprus, the white foam washing over her footprints. The oceans are calm. The spark is struck. But while she walks the sands of the living, her husband retreats into the subterranean dark, lighting the fires of a volcano and hammering a blade that will never break, waiting for the forge to speak. Myths are not records of the past. They are mirrors of the human mind, passed down, reshaped, and remembered, long after the world that created them disappeared.